I hope I can do this video justice. It's a bit on the long-ish side, about 20 minutes. It's been recommended to me by one of my subscribers, Simon, and he brought it up, reminded me about it during the last live stream that we had, and I promised that I would get to it this week. My aim is to get it up for tomorrow or by Friday. I don't know. We'll see. But I am watching it this week. I'm keeping my promise. But when I say I hope I do it justice, what I mean is I hope that this is something that I actually feel compelled to talk about. Like, is this going to trigger, not trigger in a bad way, not trigger in the way we think of it, but, you know, today with the way that word has been used, but trigger like a response or a reaction to any degree? Is it going to, you know, make me think? Am I going to be able to have a decent response, or is it just going to go right over my head, or am I not going to? I don't know. It's been one of those days, so that's why I'm not sure. I'm not feeling on top of my game right now, for whatever that's worth. So the title of this is called How Wealth Influences Health. And the premise of it sounds pretty interesting. So I guess let's see what we're going to learn. I can't remember the name of the channel. I'm sorry. I can't recall, but I will, of course, link this video in my description. Let's go.
Why do more people have heart attacks on Mondays than any other day? Especially in the UK, USA, and Australia, especially if they're employed, especially in January. Why does the USA,
January?
with the world's highest GDP, have almost exactly the same life expectancy rates as Ecuador, 62nd in GDP? Why does Baltimore have a male life expectancy?
Honestly, here I am. This is the way it's probably going to be. I'll probably end up stopping it quite a bit as I'm watching it, instead of obviously, you know, waiting until the end. But this is what occurred to me when I was watching this. This is quite fascinating. It reminded me of, so like in Mexico, I don't know what the average lifespan in Mexico is. Maybe I should look it up. But I'm not going to do that because this is just me kind of, you know, talking off the top of my head. But I know my husband has repeatedly said that life in Mexico is much less stressful than it is here, even though a lot of people in Mexico aren't well off, comparatively speaking, like compared to the way it is here in the US. So it's like with this wealth or higher level of income comes added stress. That's interesting. I mean, it's not surprising. I know life is a little slower and more comfortable and more relaxed in Mexico. Obviously, it does depend where you are, because Mexico is in a lot of ways much like the US. There are many, many places in Mexico that are like here, big bustling cities, you know, a lot of wealth, a lot of business and industry and stuff like that. But the typical feeling is that life is slower and just more relaxing. You don't have as much to worry about. And that's been something that's been repeated to me multiple times. So that's kind of what I thought of when he said that about Ecuador.
Why does Baltimore have a male life expectancy equivalent to Syria when San Jose has a male life expectancy equivalent to Japan, when they're both similarly sized cities in the United States, the richest country in the world?
Well, does it have to do with crime rate? Is the crime rate in San Jose lower than in Baltimore? I know Baltimore's got a bad reputation. So I don't know.
And why is the range of life expectancy only 2.5 years across 47 prefectures of Japan, but 7.5 years across 50 states of the United States? Why is it 9 years across the UK?
Oh, wow. trying to absorb
Why
all
am I
these numbers.
asking you? You don't know.
Why are
I
you?
don't know. Maybe you do.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Where am I?
Oh, doctor, I'm in trouble.
That's funny.
Goodness gracious me.
For every time a
It seems logical to think that wealth and the access to resources that wealth allows would be the defining factor in health.
You would think, right?
For at least the last 100 years, in both politics and economics, it was generally thought that catering to the wealthy in society, what is usually called trickle-down economics, would provide an increasing standard of living for everyone, including in the sphere of public health. But you can see here on this lovely graph from ourworldindata.org that the benefits to life expectancy from higher gross domestic product per capita taper off as it rises. It's not that GDP per capita has no relation to life expectancy, but that the difference it makes becomes smaller and smaller just after a few $1,000s.
Ah, that makes sense.
You can see that Greece has less than half the GDP PC of the US, but better life expectancy, and comparable GDP PC to Equatorial Guinea, where people live for 20 years less. Here's another way to look at it.
Wait,
Comparing life
hold on. I want to go back and read that headline.
20 years less.
Where the title
Here's
of
another
Health is related to income differences within rich societies, but not to those between them.
way to look at it. Comparing life expectancy to national income per person across several rich nations. No relationship at all. Living in a rich nation with higher average income doesn't relate to higher life expectancy.
Japan.
So,
Way on up
what
there.
is going on here?
Yeah.
Well, there is an overwhelming amount of statistical evidence that emphatically shows internal income inequality is, at the very least, an extremely important factor. In 1967, the Whitehall study began, imaginatively named after the area of London where the study took place. It followed over 17,000 men employed by the British Civil Service for 20 years with the aim of understanding how social status affects health and mortality.
There are 6 golden tips to remember in making good tea.
The British Civil Service was chosen for the study because of the highly stratified ranking system it employed. It had clear social divisions. Everyone in the study was aware of the rank of everyone else, and in addition, all of the study participants had access to the same health care. If you want to study the effects of status on health, this is a good way to do it, because you can remove a lot of factors that might confuse the results. It found that men in the lowest status employment grade were more likely to die from all causes. Heart disease, cancer, chronic lung disease, suicide, all of them and more were higher for the lowest status workers. Coronary diseases in particular were much higher. It was also found that a wide range of risk factors for health, obesity, depression, smoking, lower levels of exercise, less leisure time, more chronic health problems, higher blood pressure, fewer social relationships, were more prevalent to the lowest status workers compared to members of the highest.
Sorry, you guys, I got interrupted for 30 minutes by a phone call from my brother. So let me get back on track. I don't remember what he was saying right before I had to pause it. So I'm going to go back just a little bit and refresh my memory.
Fewer social relationships were more prevalent to the lowest status workers compared to members of the highest employment grade. Traditionally, and not necessarily unreasonably, it was thought that unhealthy behaviors might explain this gap in health differences between the classes.
I mean, that would make sense. What? Really? What?
In other words, that the poorest people had the poorest health because they were more likely to engage in unhealthy behavior, more likely to spend a lifetime eating terrible food, more likely to die in a smelting accident, that sort of thing. But when the Whitehall researchers controlled for those factors, they found that they could only explain about 40% of the variation. Even after removing those factors from the equation, men in the lowest grade were more than twice as likely to die of coronary diseases compared to men who ranked the highest. So, even those that didn't smoke, weren't obese, didn't have high blood pressure, and exercised regularly, still had a much higher chance of developing a serious illness or dying early by being lower status. The study was started again in 1985, this time following 10,000 British civil servants, women included, and it has been ongoing ever since. The results so far have been the same. Being lower status is associated with earlier death and a wide range of health problems that are seemingly unrelated to one another. So, what could account for the other 60% of these health differences? Why is it that being lower status makes people more likely to have serious health problems even if they don't engage in risky behaviors? Well, over time, many different scientific fields, chemistry, biology, anthropology, psychology, maybe a psi-curious particle physicist or two, found a unique factor.
All right.
Stress. When we feel stress, our bodies release a variety of hormones in response. One of those hormones, cortisol, is particularly notable. Cortisol is often called the fight or flight hormone. It increases heart rate and blood pressure. It increases our blood sugar levels. And with chronic exposure, it can cause a lot of damage.
Right. I knew that much.
Cortisol is an important hormone in the body and has likely helped humans survive throughout their entire evolutionary history. Imagine this, and I say imagine because even at rate, his agent apparently wasn't interested. You're walking through the jungle and Jon Voight jumps out at you. Your adrenal gland is activated and begins to pump cortisol into your bloodstream. Your heart rate and blood pressure increase, enabling your muscles to receive even more blood and oxygen. Non-essential body functions are put on hold, you stop worrying about the ironing, and your brain tells you to fight or flee. Hopefully, you choose to flee. This is Jon Voight's jungle.
Myself, oh my goodness, really?
This is
For
called
real?
acute stress,
That's funny.
something that isn't particularly damaging to the body. When the
Okay,
stress
so like
is
the
gone,
short term.
cortisol levels drop and the body returns to normal. We still experience that today. Being in a car crash, suddenly realizing that the Groucho Marx mask hasn't fooled the student loans people, taking an exam. And even then, sudden bursts of stress aren't usually harmful to the body.
But when it's prolonged.
But what is harmful to the body is chronic stress. Chronic. Not taking an exam, but preparing for it and worrying about it for weeks. Not being in a car crash, but being in gridlock 2 hours a day.
Oh, yes.
Not the student loans people finally finding you and putting the bag on your head, but the life spent looking over your shoulder wondering, will this be the day?
Right.
When cortisol is persistently secreted into our bodies, it begins to cause damage to many different bodily systems and organs, and over time, it changes how our bodies function. It makes us more hungry no matter how much we eat, especially for sugar. It makes us more susceptible to infections and viruses. It causes inflammation throughout the body.
I knew already that prolonged stress was terrible for the immune system. This is nothing new. It does make sense in a way that people who are lower status would be subjected to this because their stress would be, I would assume their stress would be things like, can we pay the bills? Can we keep a roof over our head? That sort of thing, that would be just a constant factor. Consequently, when I was thinking about my husband's family, and they were poor as poor could be, didn't even get electricity until the 70s in their house, but they had everything they needed. They lived on a farm, they made their own food. So I guess it really, I mean, I'm assuming maybe it depends on your situation. If you don't have a lot of money, but you can completely take care of yourself, maybe the factors for that stress aren't the same as it would be for somebody else in a different position. I'm just, wondering aloud.
Susceptible to infections and viruses. It causes inflammation throughout the body and is associated with a large range of diseases like asthma, skin disorders, neural degeneration, osteoporosis, hypertension, diabetes mellitus, and yes, coronary diseases in particular. It can even affect the health of future generations. If your mother was very stressed while she was pregnant with you, it changes how your body functions for the rest of your life.
I knew a little bit about that already. I knew that when an expecting woman is under extreme stress and prolonged stress, that can affect the baby. I've known that for a few years. I find that pretty fascinating. I didn't really realize that it could affect the baby in other ways. The main thing that I had seen was, and I can't remember if I mentioned this before on this channel, that I had seen them a video where they ran these experiments on a pregnant monkey, and they kept her under stress pretty much her entire pregnancy, and with like shocking her, and she never knew when it was going to happen, but she knew it was coming, that sort of thing. And what they had pointed out at the end of that experiment was that her offspring ended up being like gay, or showed homosexual tendencies. And they were, I think it was, I can't even tell you where I saw that. Maybe it was like a psychology or biology or some sort of health class, I think in college, a long, long time ago. And I found that fascinating. And that, because I didn't really know a whole lot about things like that, because my focus in school wasn't on sciences and things like that. I was more into business and computers and stuff like that. And I found that quite fascinating how, I mean, in a way I already knew, if a mother doesn't take care of herself, if she's poisoning herself with alcohol, if she's taking drugs, it's going to physically affect the baby. And so of course it would make sense that if the mother was under a great deal of stress while she's pregnant, even if she's not doing anything that's unhealthy for her, that too can affect the baby. So
she was pregnant with you, it changes how your body functions for the rest of your life. The part of the brain that handles impulse control and emotional regulation is permanently damaged. You're more likely to have problems controlling anger, more likely to develop attention deficit disorder, more likely to be depressed, more likely to have problems with your metabolism and body weight. Your brain and your body are irreversibly changed before you were even born. Over time, with chronic exposure, cortisol damages the very DNA in your cells. It causes the telomeres in your DNA to unravel, which literally means that you age more quickly.